Welcome to the Empathic Edge.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Empathic Edge with Megan Smith, founder of Empathic Edge. Megan is an attorney, negotiation professor, and dispute resolution professional focused on the future of human communication in an AI-driven world. Through negotiation strategy, emotional intelligence, and high-stakes conversation training, she helps professionals build confidence and perform more effectively under pressure. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today Megan and I are getting into a conversation about why empathy may be one of the most misunderstood advantages in negotiation. Hi, Megan. How are you?
Doing great. How are you, Sean?
I am doing pretty well myself. I'm relatively excited to get into what this is about. Empathy as a superpower, so to speak. I mean, empathy sounds, vague, overly emotional to some professionals, a little touchy-feely maybe. How do you define empathy in the context of negotiation and difficult conversations?
So I think about it less in terms of feelings and more about information. So when I define it for professionals or law students, lawyers, I describe it really as like the ability to accurately understand what the other person is experiencing, what they need, or like their interests or their underlying why, and what's really driving their position. And then they can actually use that to understand the situation more strategically.
That makes a lot of sense. It's sort of like understanding uh what drives a person, so to speak. I mean, understanding their motivation and it's insight. It's like being intuitive in it, like, oh, I get the sense that this person is XYZ, but more concrete than that. I like it. I like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And sorry, just to add on to that. So, one thing I always start with law students is we do this conflict mode assessment. So they get to learn which one of five different conflict modes they are. And I tell them that this is information in. So, every piece of information you can learn about yourself and the other side, whoever it is you're negotiating with, you get to use that strategically.
Mm.
So it's not about softening your position when I say like use empathy. It's really about knowing enough about where they're coming from and what their underlying motivations or their why is so that y'all can actually work together to find solutions and maximize value.
Yeah, it's interesting because it shifts the idea of well, you said softening their position, or maybe like reducing leverage, which is a sort of sort of a dynamic in negotiation. Um, and now we're in like, oh no, this is a strategic advantage if you master it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yes. Especially if you're thinking about the relationship. So, not all relationships are relationships that are being broken. A lot of them you need to repair or strengthen, or you're continuing in a long term relationship. So, being empathetic with the other side really can just benefit you in the long term.
What about, yeah, so you're in a negotiation, and the other person feels genuinely heard, genuinely understood. What shifts?
Everything. I think at that point, if they feel heard, then you're really at a place where you both can collaborate and
Hmm.
focus on, I mean, really, I would say two big things. One is, creating more value and maximizing, right, the value for both sides. So the goal isn't really to say, okay, we've got just this much pie and I'm going to take 80% of it. You only get 20%. I want to work to grow the pie. How do we expand and come up with creative solutions together so that we can benefit either ourselves more and better or our clients?
What kind of pie?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know why off the top of my head I'm thinking cherry pie, but I don't even like cherry pie that much. Maybe rhubarb. That's
Okay.
that's a
Oh,
good
yeah.
yeah.
I like a good apple rhubarb. I want 80% of the rhubarb pie. You
You
can
know,
have. I'll
yeah,
take
you can do it.
20%. I'll take 20% of the cherry pie.
There we go. See, we're gonna split it, right?
Yeah.
There was this example I saw on social media recently, and I think it was a couple where the husband would always take the like crispy fries from the wife, and the wife would always take the other kind of fries. And they never really communicated about it. They just thought, oh, that's because that's my spouse's preference. Like, I want to give them what they enjoy. And they learned they were really just doing it to benefit each other all those years. And they really liked the kind that they were giving away, or that they were, I think, taking. So
Well,
communicating through those things too. So we now know you prefer the cherry.
back to the, the empathy, you talk about, empathy as a strategic tool, or, strategic empathy. What does that actually look like in the midst of a difficult conversation or negotiation, like in real time? How's that show up?
So I think two specific ways that you could see it, or that you could incorporate it, uh, like into your daily life and communications. One would be taking a break or a pause if you need to. So when tensions do get high, if you feel as though you're not really making any progress, if you take a step back, you can then help yourself to reset. And again, remind yourself of, what are my interests or my client's interests? Like, what's their really underlying motivation, and what's the other side's? And am I allowing ego to get into the way? Because that is what happens a lot of the time. I think the other thing that you can do too is ask yourself in the moment, whether you take a break or not, is, am I coming from a place of genuine curiosity? I like to say that the ABCs are so important in negotiation. It's always be curious.
No.
And so if I kind of ask myself that question, okay, so like, was that an open-ended question? Was I really actively listening? Did I actually care about what the other side was saying? And if the answer is no, then I do need to pause and reset.
Well, and in personal relationships, and certainly in legal context, conversations can escalate quickly. The temperature gets turned up. What do you think tends to push people into defensiveness versus problem solving in those situations?
One thing that I'm not certain most people would think of immediately is a lack of preparation. You do tend to become more defensive if you do not feel that you are adequately prepared. So by just over preparing, or prepare before the negotiation or the difficult conversation, that should actually alleviate a lot of those rising tensions that tend to occur in difficult conversations. So I think that that is primarily what happens. But then I also think that anytime your core values, or your sense of who you are, or like your integrity or your competence or your kindness, right? Well, I feel like I'm a kind person, and you're saying that I'm mean or I'm a bad person. That's addressing, one of my core values. And that's when we tend to become defensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and that lack of preparation. Yeah, I think I can relate to that in a number of contexts. Like, oh my God, I hope they don't bring up X, Y, or Z, because I know I'm underprepared, and then that's just going to off my game generally. Interesting.
But I actually see what happens with most people is they don't realize that they're underprepared. So they go into it, and I see it a lot with like salary negotiations, or like for an employment agreement. So a student is trying to get a first job, and they just wing it, and they say, well, I thought about these things beforehand. So then the question comes down to, well, what research did you do beforehand? What did the preparation look like? Did you look at, even the American Bar Association provides some like salary information. Did you go there? Did you talk to colleagues? Then did you, practice with interview questions with a partner? And most of the time the answer to that is no, but they say they thought they were prepared before going into it, but it's almost as if they need a checklist before going into it.
Yeah, I know. In all your experience, I mean, I know you have a lot of uh, scenarios. I'm curious if maybe you could share an example of a negotiation or difficult conversation where empathy changed the direction or the outcome of that interaction.
Yeah, I think also being a business owner, I, have to have difficult conversations with our team at times. And sometimes that's because, certain expectations aren't being met, or there seems to be a lack of communication or some kind of misunderstanding. And so I I believe, going into a conversation, first of all, actually having the conversation, that's a huge piece
Right.
of it, right? I think a lot of people tend to be more reactionary and say, we're just done. This isn't working. I want to have a conversation. I want to know what's going on. And I also hope that I get to know my people well enough beforehand that I can kind of tell if there are certain triggers maybe outside of work that could be impacting them. So I have to pay attention. I have to listen to them. But I think going into that conversation, I would prepare, especially for a conversation with a team member, because I know I can get emotional about it too, right? Especially if you've worked with somebody for a long time and you feel like
Sure.
they're letting you down. So I would go and prepare, and then I would really definitely want to listen.
Hmm. Well, and this, not like I invented this. Someone told me once where, um, just to acknowledge because like you said, sometimes first of all, have the conversation, right? Because a lot of people just sweep it under the carpet or whatever, but just acknowledge that, hey, this is a difficult conversation for me to have. And that, the other person may be like, oh, me too, and then right there, it's okay not to necessarily be super articulate in the moment or whatever, because, uh, it's just sort of acknowledge I'm not a cold, hard monster, you know, I'm feeling tentative about having this conversation. So,
Absolutely. I like
uh,
that. I'll
hey,
use that.
all right, well, there you go. You're gonna have that. Hey, we just got a couple minutes left. I'm wondering, I was thinking about boundaries, leverage boundaries, that sort of thing. And I'm wondering, when you have an effective negotiator, like how do effective negotiators stay empathetic without, you know, crossing or losing boundaries, clarity, leverage, which is often comes up in the legal realm.
Part of the preparation beforehand that I think any strong negotiator should be doing is considering a few key things, including their interests. So, both their own underlying interests and the other parties. And also your BATNA, your best alternative to negotiated agreement.
Say that again.
So it's called BATNA. It's the best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
All right.
So before going into a negotiation, I need to do the prep work to say what do I have kind of as a backup. So for instance, if I am interviewing for a job that I really want, because let's say the culture is great, the pay is wonderful, and this is really where I want to go, but I do have another offer already. I know that it may not be my BATNA in this scenario. We'll just say that it is because it's the only offer outside of this one that I'm hoping to get that I have. So I know that if I do not reach an agreement, if I do not get what I need today in this negotiation, I do have a pretty solid kind of backup. So it's my best alternative. So I know that if, let's say, I have a certain salary range and I say I need to get, this amount
Yeah.
and they're just far below it, and this other company has offered that. I've got to then weigh some other things that
Right.
maybe, not salary, but maybe it is, the corporate culture, the environment, the PTO, those sorts of things.
Mm.
But for the most part, if I've done the work and I can sort of compare beforehand, I know that I should not take a deal if it doesn't reach, these certain aspects that I need. So I know that I'm not going to end up in a worse position because I'm always going to keep my BATNA at sort of the forefront of my mind. The other
Okay.
thing that I
Yeah.
think is really important that I see my law students struggle with a lot is I love that you use the word boundaries because I think it's very important to also remember that just because somebody asks you a question doesn't mean you have to be responsive to it.
Oh,
Right? I mean, so sometimes we see students will say, well, just tell me what your bottom line is. I mean, that will be the first question out of the gate. And then the other student, I mean, probably at least 8 times out of 10 will say, oh, and they get flustered. They're like, well, I mean, okay, I guess I'll tell you the best deal. And I said, well, why? They didn't build rapport yet. You haven't learned anything. You didn't owe them that. You did not need to do that. So you can still stay firm while also being empathetic, right? You could still actively listen to them. You can still acknowledge them and their feelings. You can summarize what it is that they're saying. But you don't have to just give in.
Yeah, yeah, you don't have to exactly just respond like, "Oh, well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to tell you that, but I want to learn more about XYZ first," or whatever it might
Exactly.
be. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
super cool. Um, anything else you want to share with the world here on that, Megan?
I would just say when it comes to negotiating, I sort of ascribe to the Ted Lasso model, which is be curious, not judgmental. That's Ted Lasso quoting Walt Whitman, although I think the Walt Whitman Foundation said that Walt Whitman never actually said that. But it always comes back to genuine curiosity. So go into negotiation being genuinely curious about the other side. Do your prep work first, right? You shouldn't be like completely surprised by things most of the time if you've done
Right.
the work beforehand. But if you remain curious, you'll learn so much more and I think be able to create more value for yourself and the other side.
Oh, great wrap up. Uh, a pleasure talking to you, Megan. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your point of view. Really enjoyable.
Thank you so much.
You bet. That's it for today's episode of The Empathic Edge. If you'd like to learn more about Megan Smith, Empathic Edge, and their work around negotiation, communication, and AI powered practice training, visit the website empathicedge.com. Thanks for listening. Do us a favor and leave some thumbs up, maybe a review, share a link, subscribe to the podcast. So many things you could do, and we would be grateful. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.